I've thought about this class over and over again. So we'll do a little appetizer verse, and then we can do our regular schedule in a few minutes. So in the Gita, as you all know, these are the 4 main verses called ChaturSloka, means you can summarize in chapter 10, you can summarize. Oh, am I sharing?
Nothing is up there. Just gotta hit the
Oh.
share button probably.
Sorry.
We talked about these verses in the last class, yeah?
Yes. So I've been really focusing on these. And one thing that really has struck me is this one. And if you break this one down, it says, mat chitta. And sometimes Sanskrit is translated a little bit differently than what it actually means. This says their minds engaged in me, but chitta, mat chitta can mean their hearts too, mind and hearts. It's not just like mind, like your mind, but it's also your heart. Mad gata prana. So their hearts are to me. To me, the path is their life. So very sweet. To those people, their hearts and this path is their life. Oh, TS is here. And then bodhayantam means preaching or interacting. Parasparam, amongst themselves, like as we're doing here. Katayantam, like kata, they're speaking about me always. Tushanti, they are very pleased. And ramanti, like the word Rama, they're feeling bliss. So this verse here is just so sweet because Krishna is saying that, and you don't really get this kind of language through the rest of the Gita, Tushanti cha, ramanti cha. But, and he's not saying yogis, Brahmins, Kshatriyas, high classes. He's just saying those who are on this path and are dedicated, they like to talk amongst themselves about me always, and they feel pleasure and satisfaction. I thought, oh, that's like our Bhagavad Gita class. Okay. I look forward to this. I think about it all week. So this should be our official motto. Matchittamagata prana bodhayantas parasparam katayantas chamam nityam tushanti cha ramanti cha. What's y'all's thoughts on that? Any commentary?
The word bodhayanta.
Uh-huh.
It's like talking about, right? But that word bodha is connected. Like, what's the root of the word bodha? It makes me think of buddhi, like to, not just talking, but engaging the intellect.
Yeah, bodha means like Bud means intelligence, like Buddha.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Buddhi yoga would be your intelligence. So but sometimes like a word used in action means something a little bit differently. It means there's your intelligence, but then when you use your intelligence, in this case, they're using it as preaching, means you're engaging your intelligence. Bodhe anta, right? Let's look at this and see if there's any other words.
Like you're sharing or you're disseminating it.
Yeah. Yeah, you're engaging with your intelligence, like when we say, what do you think? And then we sit, we talk, well, I think this and I think that. And the way I was feeling this and that. And just as like Ashriel was saying, what sparked this, she was saying, it's a meaningful and discussion that we have here. The sharing, the interaction. It's almost an exact like example of this verse. Katyayantas chamam nityam, constantly talking about me. There's joy, satisfaction, using the intellect. Isn't that nice? And Ed has showed up, and TS is here. Haven't seen TS in a while. How are y'all doing? Let's see, what's this? No video, no problem. Okay. Let's start. We ready for class, our discussion, friends?
Let's do it.
Oh my God. And Virginie's here too. We got the band back together. Okay. We went over the word for word this last week, right? Who wants to, how about you all turn your microphones on and let's see if by memory or notes, you can give me the word for word for this. So we're not just making sounds out of our mouth, but we're actually like saying things that have meaning. You can start us off, Dharma. Om means
Like ooh, weird echo. It's like the invocation.
Yeah. It's like ringing the doorbell. Somebody's echoing. Maybe if you're not speaking directly, put your mic on mute. Then Jnana.
Without knowledge.
Without knowledge. Tamurandasya.
This word you were saying is because the eyes are like covered with gunk.
Blinded by ignorance, like darkness.
Darkness.
Jnananjana.
Am I the only one answering the questions? Is it just me?
Yeah. You're the leader. You're a fearless leader.
You've given me the knowledge. Gyananjana, you've given me.
It's a salve of knowledge.
Salve
Yes.
of knowledge.
And Salakaya is placing the salve of knowledge. And then when you place the salve of knowledge, what happens to your chakshurs, your eyes?
They're healed and they can see.
They open. Yes.
Open, that's right.
And to that person, the guru, who has opened our eyes with the salve of knowledge, we
salute you.
Salute you. Offer our namas. Cool. Hold on. My phone is ringing off the hook here. 1 second.
I think that echo might be from because I have my computer hooked up to a speaker that is a little bit louder, so that's why I'm keeping mine on mute.
Okay.
Do you hear that echo right now?
No.
Coming on? No? Oh, okay. Well, then maybe that's not it.
Okay.
The Gyananjana is given the salve of knowledge. Shalakaya is that the eyes open, or that would
add is to put it.
Or to put it to, okay.
Yeah.
Gyananjana is the salve of the knowledge. The Shalakaya is the giving.
Yes.
Okay.
So there's a verse in the Brahma Samhita, which is Premanjana Charita Bhakti Vilochanena, that there's prema, the salve of prema, premanjana. And this is Gyananjana, or the salve of knowledge, placed over the eyes. So Om is the doorbell, Agyana is ignorance, timirandasya darkness. So darkened by ignorance, the eyes, placed by a salve of knowledge, those eyes open up. To that person, the Sri Guru, I offer my namaha, which is this bending forward. Okay, cool. Okay, let's chant it all together. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jananjana Salakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. How's that? Nice? Okay. Okay. Oh, Harbol. Oh, this is, you made it. We have a special guest here. Ariana is from TikTok. Harbol.
Welcome.
And where are you located, Ariana?
Sorry, I don't understand.
Where's your location? Where do you live?
Romania.
Huh?
I'm from
Where?
Romania.
Romania. Wow,
Yes.
very nice, very nice. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Harbol.
Haribol.
Harbol. So sometimes we go on TikTok and we do japa. We sit and chant Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And Ariana, you joined us one night for TikTok japa, right? Yes, Harbol. Okay, so this is our regular group here. Dharma Shakti is our fearless leader. And this class is kind of based out of her yoga studio. So Dharma, what should we do? Do you want to keep reading these? I'm always confused if you want to do the whole thing.
I think we did a nice thorough job last week talking about it. I say let's dive back into the text unless people really have an interest, and they, we're here to serve you guys. So if anybody really would like to dive into those, we can.
Or just want to say them?
We can say them, sure.
Or do you want to just go to class and study? Why don't we just read them through? So I'm just going to read them through. So we did the first one, then Shri. So everybody just follow along. And if you don't know, then just pretend. Shri Chaitanya Manobistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadam Hayam Dadati Sapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagarjatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sabadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitams Cha. I'm kind of just tearing through this because it's a lot. We can go on forever in these classes. And Ariana, we do this for introduction to the Bhagavad Gita before we start. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrisabhanu Stute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And you all say Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So I'm confused on where we left off. I also have a Friday class and we're kind of just in the same area, so I'm not exactly sure. Did we get to the point where we completed where Krishna is talking about simply the soul here, and then he's just kind of jumps right into being a Kshatriya? Did we talk about that?
I think we did touch on that. So just to recap it, we were talking about Sankhya and yoga and how Krishna talks about that in the Gita and how we see remnants of that in the Yoga Sutras. And we're just kind of going through the second chapter and Krishna sort of coming to the aid of Arjuna after he asks to be his student. I'm your student, please tell me what to do. And
Okay.
we did. I think we went over the important verses. Chapter 2, verse 12. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. And I think we're about there, where you have us.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool.
Okay?
So if we remember, this chapter is called, though it says Gita, contents of the Gita summarized, the actual Sanskrit of this chapter is called what? Who remembers? Sankhya Yoga, right? The Prabhupada wrote here, contents of the Gita summarized. This chapter is called Sankhya Yoga. And who, you can also look at your notes, remembers the 3 proofs of Sankhya. What does make something Sankhya?
Not in the order and not with the technical names, but I know one is Hanuman, which is, I'm not sure, I just remember the name Hanuman.
Anuman.
One was this references to spiritual texts. And I think Hanuman was inference.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Inference, and then the reference to the spiritual texts. And those are the 2 that I remember. Without.
So that was Anuman, which means inference, means that you can see one thing, make an assumption that something else being similar would be the same. Then there's Shabda, which is quoting the Shastras. Then there was one more. Yes. Pratyaksha, that's right. Pratyaksha, which means?
The experience that we make of something. Yeah.
Yes. And you know that because you know which verse that has that in it.
Pratyaksha Vagamam Dharmyam, and it's Rajavijja Rajaguyam. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pavitram idam uttamam pratyaksha vagamam dharmyam susukam kartum avyayam.
Yeah. Perfect. So Ariana, we're doing a little recap. We went through the first chapter, and then where Arjuna is lamenting, doesn't want to fight. Then chapter 2, Krishna, and also for TS who's missed out, chapter 2, Arjuna still is complaining. He accepts Krishna as his guru. Now I'm a disciple and a soul surrender unto you. Please instruct me. And then at that point, Krishna starts to basically defeat his argument, saying your philosophy is no good because even though you're philosophizing so much, you're still lamenting, which you shouldn't be lamenting if your philosophy had value. Then we were talking about why this chapter is called Sankhya Yoga, because Sankhya Yoga is based on 3 proofs. Shabda, which means you quote Shastra. Anuman, which means you infer something from something else. And Pratyaksha, which means you experience it with yourself. Like, how do you prove that the universe exists? It just does because you experience it. So then Krishna, he quotes Vedas, by saying, never was there a time that I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. This is directly quoting from the Vedas, where the Vedas are called Adhyatma, or about the soul, which is eternal. And then Krishna uses inference and pratyaksha together, where he says, you can see that the soul is moving forward in the body and it doesn't change. So when the body changes at death, the soul just continues. Then Krishna speaks really clearly in most of these verses about the soul and the senses. Like here's inference, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress, and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. So you can infer, just as the winter and summer is coming and going, and maybe we're super lusty, but then it will go away, or we're super angry, it will go away, or we're super happy, it will go away. So Krishna is using this inference, which is called Dharma. What is inference in Sankhya? Anuman. Right? Anuman, Shabda, and Pratyaksha. Okay. Should we all say it together? Anuman, Shabda, Pratyaksha. Sankhya Yoga, or Sankhya Analytics. And we're going to look at that in chapter 3, where Arjuna and Krishna are discussing. And Krishna says to Arjuna here, I've already explained that there are two different kinds of people. One who tries to understand the self through empiric philosophical speculation, or Sankhya, and one who tries to do it by devotional service. So we're getting there. So what is Sankhya based on? 3 things.
Shabda, Anuman, Pratyaksha.
Exactly. Shabda, Anuman, Pratyaksha. Pratyaksha, Shabda, Anuman. Shabda, Anuman, Pratyaksha. These 3 things is what Sankhya is based on. And as you go forward through the Bhagavad Gita, we'll see Krishna uses this a lot, because he's essentially saying there's kind of 2 types of people. One who wants to analyze everything, which works, and one who just wants to engage in work or karma. How do those 2 become yogis? We shall soon find out. So, are you following, Ariana?
Yes, I'm also look on Romanian translate because my English are not very, very good, but I understand what you say.
Am I going too fast for you? Am I speaking too quickly?
If you can, yes.
Slow down?
Yes, little bit.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'll slow down a little bit. So with that being said, Krishna then goes on and speaks mostly in this rest of this part of the chapter about the soul, all the way up to text 30. Yes, up here. And all these verses are all very soul-based, describing the functionality of the soul. What is it like? So where we ended here, let's say here, this one, which some of us memorized this in a previous classes. Dihino sminyata dehe komaram yovanam jara tata dehantara praptir diras tatra namuyati. And Dharma said we talked about that in our last class, right? So then as we move forward, Krishna talks about the soul and the senses together, because Now, why would see he's talking about the soul, but why would Krishna keep going back to discussing the senses, specifically to Arjuna, after just a few verses? You can speculate. You'll probably be right.
No, use that word dehino, right? Like embodied, like stuck in the body. And so the soul is experiencing the world through the senses.
Yes. And so how is that related to Arjuna?
Because Arjuna is having an overload of his sensory experience, which is giving him this experience of like an anxiety attack and having this existential crisis.
Yeah, exactly. So like an example would be,
instead of sober with his
yeah,
feelings and emotions.
Yeah, he's freaking out. So like a good example would be if you have a child and you give them an ice cream and the ice cream falls on the floor and they freak out. What would be the first thing you would say to them?
So what kind of parent you are.
Yeah, I guess it depends on what kind of parent you are. But what would a good-hearted parent say to their child? Ariana, what would the first thing you would say to a child who dropped their ice cream on the floor?
I think I will buy you another.
You can get another one, right? So Arjuna is freaking out, and Krishna says, you're lamenting about the body. You get another one. Don't freak out, right? Then you may say to them something like, there's so many ice creams. You can have another one. It's not that big of a deal. And then you may get to the point where you say, you shouldn't freak out just because you drop an ice cream on the floor. So two things, you can get another one, and you should learn to control yourself more, right? So Krishna is saying to Arjuna, you can get another body, and you should learn to be a little bit more controlled with your mind. The senses are like this, and you should learn to be like this. What's your thoughts, Virginie?
Yeah, I would also add, like, it's only an ice cream.
Yeah.
And it's just the materialistic aspect of what you want or who you are, but the body is just the body. Your soul is much more. So yeah, being detached will allow more control and acceptance and all that. But
yeah, and you have to learn to go through it, right? Like I've said this before, I'm kind of recapping a little bit. Here's a picture of my oldest son. Isn't he cute? Now he's 15. He's almost 6 feet tall. He tried to give me a hug yesterday and laid on top of me. It was like a full-grown man laying on top of me. It wasn't cute. So I could, now if I was fully crying my eyes out at the loss of my son, if I say, oh, and they go, what's up, Jugga? You seem so sad. And I say, I lost my son. You go, oh my God, really? Yeah. See, here's a picture of him. He's gone. And then my 15-year-old says, I'm right here. And I say, no, this one is gone. And I cry and cry. You'd think I need to get it together because he's still here. So it's an attachment, right? So the two things, the body changes and learn to control the senses. So this
Tori has a question. Do you want to type it in the chat box or do you want to unmute yourself?
TS has a question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we thought it would be too much to do it on the chat box.
Yeah.
We were wondering if there's a way to address the child without being invalidating by saying, it's just an ice cream. Don't freak out. That was really triggering for us because you're minimizing the child's experience. And yes, we were talking about a child, like as an example, but if we're putting it into a Krishna consciousness perspective, which is that we aren't the body, we can get another body. I think that example didn't resonate, especially with, I know with all of you teachers on here that we've shared our medical challenges. And so it's not as simple as it was displayed on that example of, it's just an ice cream or it's just a body, we can get another one. That it feels like, is that what we're supposed to do within ourselves? Like right now, like, oh, we're going to get another body. So who cares about what's happening right now? It's just a medical condition. It's just a body. Can somebody speak more to that, please?
Yeah, thank you for your contribution in the conversation. And my personal opinion is that it's a balance of the two. And that's why when Jagai asked the question, I said, well, it depends on how you parent. And we all do different with different styles of parenting. And so I want to just make sure that you all know, I don't think that there's just one right way to do it, other than as loving as you can in that moment for what that person or child may need. But acknowledge, like a child can't quite understand that things are temporary. So you say, it's okay, we get another one. And then you follow it up with, and we understand that you're upset. It is ice cream. We can always get another one. Let's learn to control our emotions. And so not to downplay, like you're overreacting. They're a child. We talked about that in the last class of having grace for ourselves as we're moving through our spiritual journey. There's a maturation process that has to happen, just like with children. We use a lot of analogies with children last time, and how children have to go through the maturity process. There's no way around it. And so berating them for not doing well at something that they don't know that they can control or learn how to deal with their emotions isn't helpful, right? So it's always a delicate dance in dealing with situations and that are not as simple as spilled ice cream. And Jagai is using that analogy just so that we can get clear on the point and not to downplay somebody's experience, right? It's a way to really emphasize and hone in on a point. When you put it in a simple analogy like that, like it makes sense. Where the gap is how do we carry it over into more difficult things in life? And that's where the practice is. That's where these philosophies come into play to support us in this process. And you find many verses in here. Krishna never says like you shouldn't feel. He's just saying learn to tolerate without being disturbed. He's not saying, and he says learn to tolerate. He doesn't say you should just tolerate. He's alluding to like it is a process. And so we have to remember the context of what we're reading is Krishna is basically giving Arjuna a direct download. And then we have Jagai giving us oversimplified analogies on purpose so that we can make sense of these deeper philosophies. And this class is to support the process of bridging that gap. Like how do we now apply these things in more difficult situations? So I hope that's helpful. And I don't know if Jagai wants to add anything or anyone else.
No, it's so nicely said.
Can we speak to what you said?
Yes.
Dang it, we forgot the last sentence that you said, because that was like what we were going to tag off of.
That this class, this study group, is to support the process of bridging the gap between the philosophy that when simplified makes sense, but yet when we have to apply to the difficult parts in our lives is very challenging and bewildering.
Oh, okay. Thank you for repeating it, that Dharma. So then I think with bridging the gap, we wanted to hear maybe what Krishna would say, or maybe what Krishna could say through you as teachers If you're trying to get a maturation of emotion, so you're not like reacting to bodily things or human circumstances, how does one go about that in their own Krishna consciousness when you have somebody like Megs or somebody who has any other mental deficit that they can't have that maturation? Then how do we bridge the gap of that maturity of emotions or something? Like, I'm confused.
So I want to just point to this verse here, that the last sentence, one must learn to tolerate. And I think that's sometimes hard for us to understand, because we think it just means we just accept it and we're okay, like we're totally at Zen with it. We're not. The goal is to not be so moved by it, even though it is still happening within you. And so when we have, we're on the all the different spectrums of, neurodiversity, that is going to look different for each person. So, that's the beauty of this path, is where can we best apply? And by best apply, I mean, feel like we're doing something and getting some results and some growth. Where can we apply? If that area is a challenge because we have, conditions with our mental health that make it really difficult, what else can we do to support ourselves so that we are in these more grounded states of being and accepting of our situation? And again, even that idea of accepting our situation is going to be very nuanced of what that looks like in each situation. Acceptance doesn't mean condoning or giving up. It's how do we have acceptance for what is and continue to move forward and bring things into our lives. If we have areas that we're really, really challenged biochemically and feel like we're not going to make any progress there, can we accept to some degree that is what it is, and where else in our lives can we bring more of this other stuff in? I don't know if that's making sense or helpful at all. And Max looks like he wants to say something, so I'll toss it over to you.
What's resonating to me is like thinking about the developing child, and what helps one to learn is feeling comfortable fucking things up, So if a kid can we learn more from failure, right? I feel like I'm channeling Dharma isms when I say these things. But in what the Gita teaches me is that we're constantly suffering, we're constantly trying to figure things out. And like, that's totally okay. Like, that's what Krishna expects of us, to constantly be suffering and struggling and trying to figure things out, and that we're always on the path when we're doing that.
And I think it's important to support what you were saying, Max, is not being condemned or not feeling condemned for our learning curve or our journey of growth. But again, we all process people holding boundaries or holding accountability for us, or the way that people help us. We have our own construct in our mind of what that should look like. So, everything is, I feel like there's so much nuance to each of our situations, and that's such a beautiful aspect of life, but also can be difficult because we can't just take all this information and stamp it like, well, you have this problem, do this thing. It's really our journey to take and
apply it to our lives and practice it in different circumstances and situations.
As best we can, and not beat ourselves up, and have grace for ourselves as we are in the struggle. Like Max said, that's part of the design, and it's frustrating and it's beautiful at the same time. And accepting that, like, it is what it is, meaning we can't go back and change it. It just, acceptance is when we stop wishing that things had turned out differently. We stop putting energy into something that we can't change. And so, again, I don't think Jagai meant to imply that we should just dismiss children and their feelings and their emotions. That analogy was used to simplify a philosophy. But I'm glad that you brought it up so that we don't think that it's just that simple. It isn't just about like telling the 3-year-old like, oh, get over it. It's just the ice cream. We'll get you another one. There's a grace in the way that we impart these teachings down to each other. And as much as we want some mercy and some understanding and some compassion for our journeys, we have to give that to others as well, as we are messing up, as we are making mistakes, as we are failing and learning through the process. So I hope that is helpful. Virginie, you'd like to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to like bring back also all this discussion to Sankhya, because it's a perfect example, I feel, that we talked about this ice cream and thing, which was, of course, a caricature of that situation. But it's so interesting that Tim Satori brought that up, because it shows us the importance of pratyaksha with inference and reference. If we take, for example, a kid, with that ice cream and the parents, you said, Dharma, that it depends on the parents, but it also depends on the child, because each child may have a different reaction, because we're all having a different sensibility and emotion. So some child, you could tell them, oh, it's just an ice cream, and they forget about it, and they're like, yeah, whatever. Some other child will have a very strong reaction to that, and it's okay. There's no dismissing the reasons why they're feeling this emotion, but pratyaksha is about this experience and the particularities of that experience. The parents involved, the child involved, the emotions and all that, and then the inference, how we refer to that. And maybe we read something about education, children education, and that we shouldn't let them, have everything they want, or we should not dismiss them, or whatever. So that's the inference part that will influence how we behave. And also the reference with Shabda that can bring us to make peace with our full experience. But it's very interesting, because with any example we may bring to this class, we can connect it to what we are studying. So it was very interesting.
That's a really good point. Immediately, I thought some kids would it would have fell and they wouldn't have had a problem. They would immediately picked it back up and ate it, and then the parent would have had to have a totally different response. Not just that it's just the ice cream, right? They would have been like, 10 seconds.
Talking about the body and germs, and on a physical level of hey, your body cannot handle these germs, right? It shifts into more of a physical conversation now.
I really do appreciate that shift also, because we're looking at this kind of from Krishna to Arjuna, but Arjuna is also having an experience with perception and inference and referencing spiritual texts and what he knows. So,
and let's keep in mind that Arjuna asked Krishna for this information, right? Arjuna requested it. And so I'm reminded of a story, I forget where I heard it from, but there's some Brahmin, and these wives had lost their husbands, and they were all really, really sad and lamenting. And their husbands were also, well studied in these philosophies, and the women are just distraught. They all lost their husbands. And one Brahmin says to the other Brahmin, shouldn't somebody just go talk to them and tell them, come on, you know better, your husbands are not the bodies, and they've all left their bodies, and so just why are you lamenting so much? And the other Brahmin says, it's not the appropriate time. they cannot receive that information right now because they are in their, they're having a process. And so once their lamentation has subsided, then I can go and talk to them and remind them about this other aspect. But right now, that information will not be comforting to them. And so I think it's important that we remember that when, you know, we're dealing with other people in our lives and we just want to tell them, like, come on, just get over it. Like, why are you so attached? It is dismissive because they are going through a process where they're having to deal with their attachments. And it's not that easy to just get over it. And that's why we have these classes to support our process of untangling from our attachments. Team Satori.
Yeah, we're feeling really supported with all of these things that you all shared, each one of you, and so we are realizing what you were saying, Dharma, about the lamenting and not being able to take that information or whatever. We realized that was coming up briefly in this discussion, like when it started talking about the child and, you know, how do you respond and all of this, and then like controlling your emotions and all of this. We've been struggling with all of that, and it's created like how to manage our emotions. Like it's been really extreme for us lately, and we realized a sensitivity as you guys were talking, or not you guys, but as you all were talking, we noticed this sensitivity of, oh wait, like, can we not hear this information? Like, is it not like taking us in? And like for a second it was like, no, like we need to get off this call. It's like, it's not working for us. But in sitting with it and sharing it and then speaking it, it helps us see that there was a mild sensitivity, like this resistance to what was being shared from what Jagai said, the verses, etc. But the resistance was because we thought Krishna was judging us in our own storyline. It was like, oh my gosh, well, we don't have control, or like all of these judgments. And then it's like, it felt like the Christian God of judging and, you know, condemning to hell. And so that was like the sensitivity that came up of like, oh my gosh, well, we suck and we're not doing this right. And but it was like not even coming from anyone in here. It was like Krishna, I don't know, like Krishna was like burning down on us, like you are terrible at this. But the point of this is the grace and the acceptance, like Virginie was talking about, and then Max was talking about teaching the child about it's okay to be fucking up. And then that's the grace and the acceptance that everybody is on their own path. So we felt bad about ourselves because we're thinking Krishna's judging us, comparing us to everybody else, but really that's not actually happening. And I'm just speaking this into the existence to rid that out of the cells of my body, because I know and I affirm that Krishna did not throw some fire at me or say that I was bad because of my own emotions.
Absolutely correct. In fact, Krishna says at some point that he is neutral. He is impartial. There is no judgment.
Yeah, I want to add something to that. Thank you for that, TS. I was just about to say what you're saying, then you said it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, beautiful.
So if you come, I screwed up. So if you come to this part of the Bhagavad Gita, where Arjuna's, he's got an issue. He's saying, I don't know what's better for me. Should we fight? And I'm confused. I have no idea how to get rid of this grief. And then he goes to Krishna and he basically just says, you're my guru, I'm your disciple, okay? So at that point, you would think that Krishna would, let's say our normal sentiments, you would think that Krishna maybe pat him on the back, tell him he's gonna be okay, maybe give him some tissues, give him a glass of water. But instead, Krishna is standing there smiling at him. which could be triggering. And then he says to him, well, speaking learned words means you're speaking something, but you're still mourning for what is not worthy of grief. So basically he's saying, you're having this great philosophy, but it's not working. Because if it was working, you would not have lamentation. So for the first thing that Krishna does is he criticizes Arjuna, essentially. And you would think, well, that's not cool. This guy's having a full-on panic attack in front of like all these people the right before a war. It's not right. But the point is that this philosophy and real change comes about through in this path, and that's not the only way that there's real change, through exposing, opening up, looking at those things that are giving us trouble compassionately, and then working through them. So Krishna is directly pointing at his weaknesses and his faults, and now he will compassionately move him through it. It's like an intervention, right? Like if somebody's really having a hard time, they go to an intervention and people say, you're an addict. There's no real nice way to say that. So, and I'm saying this because you're not the only person in classes that I've been in that weren't triggered by something that they've heard or read in the Vedic teachings. It happens a lot because that's the point of it. And it may not be this, it may be something else. It may be, attachment to the body, blah, 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 so many things. But the triggering process done correctly through the Vedic teaching is part of the change that we go through to become unattached to the body, to become unattached to this world, to move to unattachment to spirituality, to connect with spiritual people, to change our lust to devotion, to change our anger to compassion, to change our agitation to peace. There has to be the process of identifying the lust, the anger, and the agitation to make that move. So that triggering process is part of spiritual life. And it's not always easy. So I fully agree with what you said. I myself have gone through a lot of drama in my own spiritual life, and it's not been easy.
Reminds me of when they say, be careful what you pray for. If you pray for patience, then, the universe sends you plenty of opportunities to then practice the patience. You pray of like, I want to be more devoted and I want to surrender deeper. Then the universe will send you things to exercise that ability to surrender. That's what it reminds me of.
I have a friend who's very funny. And one time we were at the temple and there was a very, very respectable guru sannyasi who was there. And we went up to him and we went like this. And we said, thank you, Maharaj, this and that. And he said, Maharaj, please don't pray for me. And the Maharaj was like, what? He said, don't pray for me, okay? Because if you pray for me, then Krishna will remove my attachments to this material world. And I'm very attached and it's very painful. So it's, it's the point is that it's not easy. It's hard. But then when you get over it, you look back at it, you're in a new place. Now you've made growth. Right?
Yep. Yes, you had your hand up earlier. Do you want to respond or contribute anything into the conversation at this point? And also, Ariana had a question in the chat, which Team Satori beautifully addressed, but I don't know if you want to read that real quick, Jagai.
Oh, okay. Let's see.
Yeah. Did you have anything else you wanted to say or reply to?
I was trying to say that someone come to me and tell to me that I don't want this body, I will get suicide like that, and if I will die, I will be free from all these problem and everything. And on that moment, I don't know how to explain, So that's why I ask you to give me more information how I can explain to other people who are on this problem like that. Sorry for my English.
No, don't
Doing great.
apologize. We're so happy that you're here, honestly. Well, so Ariana is saying, I don't know if it's on topic, but if somebody commits suicide because they're not satisfied with their body, leaving another body is more appropriate, what happens to that person? And I would like to hear, I'd always talk. I don't always want to talk. And there's so many brilliant people here.
Well, T.S. gave a really great answer.
Yeah, I'm trying to get to that. Max said,
So
Ariana, we believe that you have the right to commit suicide and die, and that you would get a new body. However, you would not escape your current conditions. You would escape this dimension, but you would still have to manage and learn the same lessons in a new body that you ran from in your old body. So overall suicide would not save you from the problem. It would only save you from that body.
And just to tag onto that, we will be very vulnerable and lead by example. In the past few months, we have thought many times about this topic, about suicide, and that these medical challenges are too big for us, and how exciting it would be to get a new body. I'm trying to slow down. I apologize because I'm speaking too fast. We thought how exciting it would be to get a new body, and we would have none of these medical challenges, and we would be better. And we thought it was the greatest thing ever. Then we had this realization that yes, we might get a body, a new, well, not that we might, we would get another body, but we've already come so far in our healing journey, and we've already reached a higher consciousness through these spiritual practices, that not only would we still have the same problems in another body, we wouldn't be as advanced as we are. So we felt that suicide was no longer an option, because we would harm ourselves further due to a lack of consciousness, lack of self-healing and self-growth. And we would have to start from the beginning and relearn everything that we learned to get to where we are now. So we said, no, getting another body is not going to save us from anything. We've come so far now. Let's stay here and continue, because we have achieved so much.
Mm-hmm.
excellent. Thank you for sharing. Appreciate it. Max.
Yeah, I'd like to diverge from the philosophy a little bit in the conversation about suicide, just because it's my job to keep people alive in what I do, who are actively thinking about, who are sick, who are distraught, who think suicide might be an option for them. And so that's a very delicate situation to handle, and maybe not everyone is willing or in a place to talk philosophy in that situation. So the wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita might not necessarily be what convinces them. If they're a devotee, if they share this faith and this practice with you, then absolutely it's appropriate. But otherwise, I think it's very important that you realize that they're sharing something with you very delicate, that should be handled very delicately. It's they're confiding in you something very deep. Like I'm thinking about ending my own life. And so in those situations, it's important that you validate their emotions, you accept where they're at, and you listen to them, but you also convey that is because they are very depressed, very, very depressed. And when you are very depressed, you have to get some help with that. And you as a person, as an everyday person, it's great that they feel comfortable to share that with you. But if you don't now know how to hold that, you need to help your friend get to a professional so that they can get better. because you love them and that you want them to get better. That's what a person needs when they make this statement to you, to cry for help. Like, I'm so deep in this shit, I don't know what to do. I'm thinking about ending my life. So the best way to be there for them is to get them to where they need to be, you know, because they might say, oh, don't do that. I don't want you to call this. I don't want you to call that. But the best thing you can do is to listen and to understand and to not leave them alone, and then to take them to the drop ball, you know? Like, I work with kids, so like, this is not something you want your mommy and daddy to know, but this is something we're talking to mommy and daddy about. You don't have to.
Very
It's
nice.
really, thank you for that, Max. And it does bring it back to Team Satori's original question asked in here, you know, of like, in this extreme situation now, or I don't want to use the word extreme, but a desperate situation that somebody may be in, the first thing that you do is to listen and let them feel heard, and to validate what they are processing instead of dismissing it and giving them philosophy. Unless that is the type, like Max was saying, if they have this shared practice and belief with you, that may be helpful in the conversation at some point. But beginning with validating the current situation, and then, because Krishna didn't just give Arjuna this information, he waited for Arjuna to get to the place where he was so desperate, he was like, somebody help me. And then Krishna gives him this direct help. But before then, Krishna was just his friend. And I think we all need to, you know, keep that in mind, as like, as we're helping and supporting each other and our friends and our family who are struggling, that ultimately, you know, being their friend first and foremost, and validating the reality of their experience as they are saying it to us, whatever that experience may be, is learning to be the friend. And then when the moment is ripe, when they ask for it, or when that conversation comes to that place, then the help. In the case of suicide, we want to drive the conversation there. But I think in all other scenarios, it's less of an urgent thing, and allowing people to come to that realization. But that was really great advice, Max. Thank you.
Thank you, Max. Max is a clinical psychologist, and he deals with this every day. He knows this stuff.
And really quickly, shout out to Team Satori for facing that tiger that was staring you in the face and sharing that experience with us. But, you know, I really want to honor you for that realization. That's a really deep and profound realization that you were having in that process. And that is, I think, phenomenal spiritual growth and maturation. So I just want to celebrate you for that.
Very nice. And I wanted to point out, as Team was saying, that you take this is between us. I wouldn't say this to somebody who is telling me they're going to kill themselves, but because this is a Bhagavad Gita class, that you take it with you in your next life. And Krishna says that here by saying, the living entity, this is chapter 15, text 9, thus taking another gross body. So let's say you've ended your life, you've taken another gross body. They attain a certain ear, eye, tongue, nose, and sense of touch, which are grouped around about the mind. So that mind you carry with you into different lives. So whatever mind you have that's giving you trouble now, you take it into your next life. So ending the body will not satisfy the struggle that you're having with your mind. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay. So, cool. So let's continue here, unless we have other conversation. But we were here at this verse. This is so I'm just going to always point this out, though it may be relevant or not, but there's many verses in the Bhagavad Gita that are, let's say, starred amongst the students of the Bhagavad Gita. So if you were going to memorize 50 important verses of the Bhagavad Gita, this would be one of them. Many of them are in chapter 2. So matra sparsas tu kunteya stitosna sukadukada agamapaino nitjas tams tatikshaswa bharata. And then I'll read this one, and then let's read some translations of some verses going forward up to the point where Krishna then changes the topic into another topic, okay? So I'll read this one. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like, so that would be Anuman, they're like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, Osaina Bharata, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. Okay, so he's telling them, you need to start to kind of control yourself because everything changes in this world. Why don't we start reading some translations up to text 30, the next 15, if we can. Who would like to read this one?
I'll read it. O best among men, Arjuna, the person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress and is steady in both is certainly eligible for liberation.
So what would be an example of somebody who's disturbed by happiness?
Let's see. I think using as far as like being disturbed by happiness means that like I'm just super I'm trying to find a real life example of something that I was just really happy about and just overjoyed with, and didn't want to do anything else or whatever.
We had an example.
Let's hear it. Yes.
We've been feeling disturbed by happiness, like when we're like in this deep struggle and we see other people being happy or celebrating something, laughing or something. It's like it becomes almost triggering, and it's not just us. Other people, we've heard that, when you are feeling upset and you see somebody else like so bubbly, it's like almost annoying. You're disturbed. Like, how can they be happy? I'm suffering so much. How is it possible that they're laughing? That's a disgrace to me because I'm suffering.
That's a good example. I didn't think of that view of it. You could be disturbed by someone else's happiness.
I was thinking in terms of disturbed, meaning like if you're even-minded or even in your balanced in everything, when you get happy, like I taught a great yoga class, or I just graduated from college, or I just won the lottery, right? Now the disturbance from my equanimity has shifted up to such like a high state of being, and then what is the suffering part of that for me is that when I have to come down from there, now I don't want to come down from that. I want to continuously be there. This is like an ironic example, but when I used to drink, and I was like, I just want to have this nice, good, happy buzz, and I would overshoot that mark, but I still have to like make that whole entire journey to all uncycle through that. It would turn into like happiness, but then the disturbance because I can't get it again. I can't reach that same happiness or buzz or plateau again, or I can't keep it and maintain it all the time.
Yeah, great example. I was thinking about a story I read about a person who was having brain surgery, but in somehow or another, and I don't really understand this, but when they are doing brain surgery for people, they want them to be awake. Not sure why. So this person is awake, aware.
They can track if they are messing up brain signals to nerves.
Happens.
Real
Yeah.
time. Yeah, go ahead.
So the guy's awake and they're having a conversation with him while they're doing brain surgery. And the doctor went to some part of the brain, and I don't remember what it's called, some gland, like a pleasure gland. And he said, check this. Do you feel this? And he stimulated the pleasure gland. The person just felt immense, like, sense of pleasure. And at that moment, the person looked at the doctor and said, if you stop doing that, I'm going to kill you. Yeah, the doctor's sorry. But the pleasure was so intense that at that moment, the person felt such an extreme pleasure. They just they couldn't. Now it's instantly attached. Like, I can't, right? Like if you won the lottery, like you said, and now you've got hundreds of millions of dollars and Ferraris and mansions and yachts, you're like disturbed by happiness. Make sense? Any thoughts? What do you think, Ashriel?
The only thing that we thought of was you could be disturbed with your own happiness. Maybe you're in a grumpy mood and something unexpectedly makes you laugh or arises a sensation of happiness in you. And it's like you're committed to being in the grump castle, as we call it. You're committed to staying in the dungeon, in the grump castle, and someone accidentally made you laugh. And it's like, no, I'm in the grump castle today. I'm not trying to laugh and be happy.
There you go. That's an example. What do you think, Ashriel? What's your thoughts of being disturbed by happiness?
Yeah, I really like what Ed said about, being steady and having an equilibrium of emotion, and then happiness and distress, we kind of ride along the waves of that equanimity. So, being disturbed by happiness is, yeah, I can see it as like having a very similar to what Ed said of constantly craving that happiness, that excitement, or like what I first thought of was like planning a vacation or something and like being elated by like the possibilities of what might happen and like, oh my God, I'm so excited. I'm like stuck in this place of like the future and happiness of what could be. And then, maybe that vacation isn't quite as what you anticipated it to be. So then you're disturbed by your distress and comparing. And so what I think is a person who's not disturbed by these waves of emotion that we ride is certainly eligible for liberation, because you are starting to become more closer to that steady mind.
Mm-hmm. And it's a very interesting, that's why I stopped to discuss this, because you'll see throughout the Bhagavad Gita, yogis, Krishna, the philosophy really doesn't make a distinction between happiness and distress. And that's odd, because we think that we're trying to relieve distress, but why are they putting happiness in there too? We want to just be happy all the time. But Krishna is saying happiness and distress, heat, cold, honor, dishonor, like winter and summer, they come and go, but we want the happiness to stay. What the hell? So, and we'll soon learn what that means in time, but it's interesting that we're just saying, Krishna's saying disturbed by happiness. Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, so another example that I was thinking about is, have you ever laughed so hard that you either like peed upon yourself a little bit, or threw up, or start coughing and choking, and now your whole life?
Yeah. Yeah. I remember cracking a joke with my brother at the dinner table. He laughed so hard, milk came out of his nose. So he was disturbed by happiness. Okay, when we want to read another one, we have another 10 minutes. Let's try to read a few. Who's up? Ariana, so your English good enough to read this, or you want to skip?
I don't think
No.
that we
Okay.
can.
We won't put you on the spot. Virginie,
Okay.
216.
So those who are seers of the truth have concluded that of the non-existent, the material body, there is no endurance, and of the eternal, the soul, there's no change. This they have concluded by studying the nature of both. Yeah.
Nice. So now we know, what does this mean? That they've studied the nature of both. That is called?
Sankhya.
Yes, exactly. And if we look at the Sanskrit here, Sat is the eternal, and Asat, which is
Nasato. Yeah. In the beginning. Nasato. Yeah.
Nasato,
Yeah.
is not eternal. So to study the eternal and the not eternal. The not eternal doesn't persist, and the eternal doesn't change. So Krishna, and now if we're talking about Sankhya from Krishna's perspective, what would this be categorized into those three categories? Anuman, Pratyaksha, or Shabda? From Krishna's perspective, as he's...
Oh, that's Sabda.
Exactly. Good, Virginie. He's quoting those seers in the past who've concluded these things. So he's quoting them. So it's Shabda. Okay. Any questions on this before we go to the next one? So Ariana, just so you know, sometimes we read the purports, but in the first kind of phases of going through the Bhagavad Gita, because it's really a lot, my recommendation is always go through the whole Bhagavad Gita and just read the translations. Don't worry about the Sanskrit. Don't worry about the purport. And if any of the translations kind of hit you and you want to try to read the purport, then read the purport. Then the next time through the Bhagavad Gita, bring in more purports into just reading the translations. Then you have context of what it is that you're reading. If you try to read Bhagavad Gita from like page 1 and just read through, in my experience, it's too much. And people abandon it because it's too deep. So in these classes, we sometimes read purports, but we're trying to just get the context of the translations. And then maybe the next round we'll go through and we'll do some more purports. Does that make sense? So we're not ignoring them. We're just trying to get context of the verses, and you can go back and read purports if you wish. Who wants to read this one? TS or Ashrial? I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Ashrial. Am I? Somewhat.
Yeah, it's with more of like a Z sound, but if you want to say it with
Azrael.
Azrael, yeah.
Okay, sorry.
But I don't mind it the other way too. So
Azrael. Okay. Who would Azrael, since your mic is open, you want to read this one?
sure. That which pervades the entire body, you should know how to be indestructible. No one is able to destroy that imperishable soul.
Nice. And then a couple of words here. Vidhi is another form of the word knowledge. We'll see this word a lot. To know something. Vidyavanaya Samprane or Raja Vidya, right? That's like Vidya. So there's jnana and vidya. These are two kind of synonyms for the same thing, which is knowledge. And then again, whenever we
Is it the same root? Sorry to interrupt. Is it the same root as Vedanta? Is it like the same? I don't know.
Veda, I could guess yes,
Veda.
but I don't know for sure. I could look it up. But I don't know. I have a book that has the roots here. Yeah, let's take a quick look and we can and it is vid, but Veda could be its root vid. So I don't know. The root is vid. Veda could be from this root vid. I'd have to look it up. And then another kartam. These are we're just going to go over a few words that we're going to see a lot. Like in that same Rajavijja Rajaguyam Pavitram Idam Uttamam Pratyaksham Vagamam Dharmyam Susukam Kartam Avyaya. To do. Karta, karma means kara means hands. And so when you're moving your hands, you're doing karma or kartam. So these are the roots. Okay. Any questions on this before we move forward?
We just have a few minutes left, and Satori has asked, what would Arjuna be disturbed about regarding happiness? So Krishna isn't addressing anything specific with Arjuna, like when he's talking about happiness and distress. He's talking about the vacillation we experience between the two. But it's good to point out, I think, in the context of the story, is the whole distressing moment is happening because a certain side of the family wants to hoard all the things that they think make them happy, and they don't want to share with others, and that's why they're having this big whole battle.
Yeah. Very nice. I should check the messages more often.
No, that's okay. You're hosting. I can read the chat box.
Yeah. And Azrael says, another thing I just thought of might be add to the duality of happiness and distress is how the body reacts to excitement and anxiety. Exactly. And then Virginie said, could disturbed by happiness also be the fear of losing the momentum of happiness? Yeah. You know, it's this intensity, this compulsive kind of up and down. It doesn't make for a steady mind and thoughtful decisions when we're impelled by desires of happiness and relieving distress and trying to make things more and more and more. It's this like compulsion. I don't know if you know this person, Guru Sadhguru, who speaks a lot of mostly about Hinduism. My mother is very much into him, and so I've seen him on YouTube, this and that. And one day somebody was asking him about celibacy. Some kind of jerk kid stood up and said, like, what's wrong with having sex? And he very clearly said, there's nothing wrong with having sex. And the reason why brahmacharis and sannyasis practice celibacy is not because there's something wrong with it. It's because they're trying to get freed from the impulse of compulsion. And that impulse takes the mind all over the place. Where if you can have a steady mind, free from the impulse of a compulsion, like you see somebody and you're like, oh, now you have a compulsive like desire to want to satisfy that new desire that just popped up. It's very hard to have a steady mind in spirituality and practice in even spiritual life. I thought, wow, what a brilliant answer. And so in some ways, this compulsive behavior of trying to enjoy and get free from desire and moving here and there is like the squirrel mind all over the place, which makes it difficult to maintain a steady mind and focus on our spiritual practices. That's it for me.
Do you think it's fair to say in these verses when he's talking about happiness and distress, he's talking about material happiness, but not necessarily, they don't call it happiness. They have other words for that really like heart fulfillment happiness, that contentment that you get from things that aren't material, that just are fulfilling, right? So separating, because sometimes we just glob it all together, like, oh, we can't be happy, can't get too excited.
Yeah.
And it's not that we are going to experience those things, but to not be so attached to them that we get like dragged down once we come over that peak and back down into the valley. But through those peaks and valleys that we find something else to attach to that gives us that place of equanimity where we find our peace and where we find our contentment and we find our bliss and our fulfillment and satisfaction in something that isn't material, because that will be steady.
Yeah, very good, Dharma. Very true. And what you're saying, Krishna is indirectly saying in this line here by saying, whenever in the Gita and in Sanskrit, when they're talking about material happiness, they always say sukha and dukkha, sukham dukkam, sukha dukkha. You immediately know they're not talking about internal spiritual bliss. They'll use different words for that. And this, let's see. This distressing over sukha and dukkha, one who is not distressed over it means their dhira or even-mindedness is what you're talking about, that internal satiation. So there's a lot of words that are used that we kind of don't have proper like references in English. Yeah. So when you're exactly what you were saying.
Yeah.
Krishna uses this word dhira.
To that, I just kind of did a search for the word happiness in my Kindle version of the book, and so one of the first verses that popped up that relates to what both you and Dharma just said is, if you want to go to, is chapter 5, verse 24.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, one whose happiness is within, who is active and rejoices within, and whose aim is inward, is actually the perfect mystic. He's liberated in the supreme, and ultimately he attains the supreme, or she attains the supreme. So like Dharma was saying, some material happiness always keeps us stuck in that cycle.
Even if we're having a spiritual moment and then we want to capture a photo of it and put it on Instagram and share that inward happiness outward with everybody else, we're like distorting and polluting our happiness, because now we're taking something that we felt within and putting it out there into the world because we want everyone to see it, like that whole outwardly happiness rather than the happiness within. Thanks for finding this verse. I'm really
great verse, great just little ending discussion there, because that's very important, and Krishna goes through that and gets there. Obviously we're in chapter 5, and Krishna is now calling, instead of saying sukha dukkha, he's saying anta sukha, which is a happiness internal. Very nice, great quote. And then he references Brahma Bhuta, or that Bhuya, Buddha, that mind, but a Brahma Bhuta, a spiritual mind, an internal happiness. Starts to use the same words, but now prepending or preposing on it other words that mean other spiritual things.
You got your hand up. You still wanna say
I'm sorry.
No worries. Yeah, it's interesting in that chapter 5, verse 24, because it clearly says that we when we talk about happiness and distress, it's about that notion of pain and pleasure that is related to the enjoyment of the senses and materialistic experience, where when the true happiness of self-realization comes from a spiritual place, from the soul, then there's no probably distress and we're not disrupted. So I think, and it's interesting because Yogananda doesn't say happiness, he says pleasure instead of happiness, pain and pleasure instead of happiness and distress. So it gives a different also perspective on the word. Yeah.
Yeah, and this verse is nice. The Sanskrit is nice because you see Krishna is using the words like happiness, sukha, arama, enjoyment, jyoti, or like the path, the direction, but he's saying anta arama, internal enjoyment, anta sukha, internal happiness, anta jyoti, a path within. Very nice. Nice quote. Beautiful verse. He's calling that person a yogi, a mystic, but one who's connected, who has Brahma nirvana or liberation to Brahman. And he calls them Brahma Bhuta or a consciousness of Brahman. Very nice. And notice none of these verses having to do with leaving the body. They're all within the body.
So he's saying that that's how we attain, by being happy within, all that within, that's how we attain Brahma Nirvana or Brahma Bhuta, right? That's how we can attain. It is the means and the end, right? It's the practice and the results. It is the journey and the destination.
Very
Great
nice.
verse to end on. Thank you, Bhakta Ed, for bringing that into the mix here. Any last questions or comments before we close out so we can honor everyone's time? Great discussion today.
Yeah, as always.
Azriel,
This is a good group.
Azriel, go ahead.
Yeah, I would love to add that since I've been with the study with all of you, one of the biggest things that I'm coming to learn and know and feel is that, you know, Krishna is not only in, you know, my quote unquote good experiences that I have throughout life, but and I can't remember what I read, but I think I'm on chapter 7, but it was my experiences are in him, not the other way around. And so even through the negative or bad experiences, you know, whatever label we'd like to put on those, that he's there too, or that Krishna's there too, or it's throughout the whole array of all of the experiences. And that's really something that I've been trying to sit with. And I was listening to a podcast that someone was talking about a meditation they had, and it was so beautiful because I feel like I've had this like resistance towards religions throughout my life. And it was beautiful to hear that he was experiencing this deep pain and sadness, and Jesus Christ came to him and said basically, me too. And so it kind of like gave him this relief of like, oh, you know, it's in the full spectrum of emotions and experiences are within the divine, or we are within the divine. So that was just, I wanted to share that because it was just so beautiful to see. And now I'm trying to know that more throughout my life and my days. Especially when the conversation earlier came up, I was really, you know, that's something that I was thinking of. Even those like triggers and all of these things it's all divine.
A great point, and thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
In our Western Judeo-Christian culture and society, we are really programmed and influenced to believe in this concept of divinity that, you know, punishes us if we are not actively choosing to put our faith in it or abiding by its rules. And so therefore we are disposed of and neglected. If bad things are happening to you, it's because you don't have enough faith in God and all these things, right? And so knowing and understanding that the divine is there in all of it. I think actually one of my favorite memories in being raised as a Mormon was learning that prayer about the footprints in the sand, right? And you think that you're walking through these moments all alone, and it's like Christ is actually like, no, I carried you through those moments. That's why there's only one set of footprints there and not two. But remembering that it's exactly what you said. I'm so glad that you brought that into the conversation so that we can remember in our difficulties that we're not abandoned by God and we're not being punished by God. We're not being neglected by God. None of those things are happening. It's not at all what is happening.
Super nice. And I was reminded of this verse, which I'd like to share. Samaham sarva bhuteshu. I'm equal to all living beings. Na dveso. I don't hate any of them. I don't particularly na priya. I don't particularly love. God is even to everybody. But to those who are making an endeavor to engage in bhakti, mayite, I am in them. Though Prabhupada writes here, they're a friend in me and I'm a friend in them. But the Sanskrit is, I am in them, and teshu kapyaham. They are in me. Exactly what you were saying. So it's God is in us and we're in God too. It's both. Very nice. Beautiful. So nice. What a great group. My God. Why don't we do this every day?
Right. I'm glad that we had this very opening of my mind discussion. And it's so great to hear all of your stories and your perspectives.
Yeah.
Because it helps me to have a greater capacity for compassion and understanding and patience. Just hearing your stories and the things that you're going through, it helps me to serve better. So thank you all for being here. Shall we close out with our closing prayer here?
Yes.
Honoring each other. We are all the Vaishnava devotees.
Mm-hmm.
Those of us who are just on this journey together. Okay.
Okay. So we're just going to say this all together once. Vancha kalpa turubhyascha kripa sindubhya evacha patitanam pabanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances to all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. That's all of you all. They can fulfill the desires of everyone, just like desire trees. They're full compassion for the fallen conditioned souls, like me. Hare Krishna.
Great. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you all for participating.
Hare Bol.
See you next week.
Next
Have a great week.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Hare Bol.
Hare Bol.
Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Krishna.